Now that we've learned how Microsoft Excel can calculate formulas, I'm going to show you how to use this feature in a very powerful way that will save you a lot of work and allow you to calculate large amounts of numbers very quickly. So what we have on this page is a series of data that might come out of a power meter that's been monitoring the power used by a certain electrical device over a long period of time, several hours. So what we have on the left in the first column here is time, and we can see that every 300 seconds it recorded the power consumption of that device. In this case, at 0 it was 112 watts, at 300 seconds it was 80 watts, at 600 seconds it was 114 watts. So what we're really interested in is calculating energy. So the way we calculate energy is energy equals power times time. Now what we want to end up with is energy in kilowatt hours, which means we've multiplied the amount of power in kilowatts and the amount of time in hours. Now as you can see here, we have power in watts and time in seconds. So we're going to have to take that into account in our formula here. So we're going to start by clicking equals, the way we always start any formula in Microsoft Excel. Then we're going to select power. But remember, we want power in kilowatts, and the way we get from watts to kilowatts is to divide by 1000. And if I hit enter, it will do that first part of the calculation, 0.112. Now the second part is we want to multiply it by time. So we want to multiply it by the length of time that it used 112 watts. So we can assume in this situation that from 0 to 300 seconds it used 112 watts. At 300 seconds, at 5 minutes, it suddenly dropped down to 80, where it continued for the next 5 minutes, where it suddenly jumped up to 114. So we're going to multiply this by 300 seconds. But remember, we want power in hours. So time in hours. So we're going to divide 300 by the number of seconds in an hour, which is 3600. So all of a sudden that gives us the amount of energy used in kilowatt hours during that time period. Now I'm going to change a couple of things here before I go on. If I click back here, you can see the cell. One thing that's always good practice to do is to use brackets to make sure that things are done in the right order. So in this case it doesn't actually make a difference, but it's a very good habit to get into. I'm going to put a bracket around this to say I want you to divide B2 by 1000. Which is the amount of power divided by 1000 to get kilowatt hours. I want you to divide the number of seconds by 3600 to get it in hours, and then I want you to multiply the two together. Remember, the brackets ensure that those things are done first before the things outside of the brackets. And you'll see that again we get the very same number. Now, what I want to do going forward is to copy this all the way down. You can see that we've got 100 different values here, all the way down to 99. So I couldn't write that formula out 99 times, but I can also copy and paste it. So if I select this cell and press Ctrl C, or I can use copy up here, and select the cell below it and press paste, what you'll see is a number different from the one before. And the reason is, if you go and click on it, you're going to notice that we have now B3 divided by 1000 times 300 divided by 3600. And that's because Excel uses something called relative cell references. I'm going to go back to this cell up here and explain this. When I selected the power over here, I selected B2. Now, Excel doesn't actually think of that as cell B2. What it really thinks of it as is one cell to the left of the cell that I'm in. So when you copied it and pasted it down here, it still thinks one cell to the left of the one that I'm in, and that is now B3. So that means that when you copy and paste this down the sheet, it's always going to use the cell 1 to the left of the one it's in. And that makes this very powerful, as we can all of a sudden just copy this all the way down and get the same result. But before I do that, I want to change something. Let's say that the amount of time varied between each sample. So for example, this was 500 seconds. So our first sample was after 5 minutes, our next sample was 200 seconds later, and then 400 seconds later after that. you can see that this number didn't change when I did that, and that's because we're using 300 and it's been manually typed in there. So what I'm going to do is change that a little bit. I'm going to go back here and do, instead of typing in 300, I'm going to do this minus this. Now, of course, that still adds up to 300, and so we're going to get the same number. Now, you can see that we should have gotten the same number, but what we actually got was a much bigger number, and that's because we needed some brackets here. Because what happened was it actually just divided 0 by 3600 and subtracted that from 300. So we needed to do this first, to say 300 minus 0 divided by 3600. And we're back to the answer that we originally had. Now again, if I copy that down, you're going to see what happened is the references changed with that. Again, we're using cell references, so it was looking 2 cells over and 1 down. And so it's always using those right values. So I can copy that down one at a time, and we're going to get the right values in each cell as we go down. Now I could manually copy and paste that each time, but what's more effective is just to select the cell, and you'll see a little tiny box here in the bottom right corner. And if I just click and hold on to that, I can drag it all the way down to the bottom. And we can see that we get a series of values in each of these, the amount of energy used in each 5-minute period. Now there's all kinds of decimal points here, and one thing that I like to do in Excel is to really kind of clean this up and put it in some numbers that make sense. There's no point reporting these numbers to 8, 9, 10 degrees of decimal, so if I select that whole column and use this little button up here, sorry, if I select just the numbers, and use this button up here, it's going to change the amount of decimal places that we report to. So if I bring it down to this, everything's a much cleaner, much tidier way of looking at it. So that shows you how to copy and paste formulas in Microsoft Excel. In the next lesson, I'm going to be talking about absolute cell references, which gets into a little more complicated use of copying and pasting formulas. But once you really understand that, you're going to be able to copy and paste formulas throughout Excel and really be able to speed up the way you can do some of these calculations in Microsoft Excel.